this is what we adopt, this is what we send the county commissioners, and the county commissioners vote on. And, I mean, you can only kick the can down the road as long as you can. You know, at our last meeting, we talked about the Burley County one. There was a lot of good things in there compared to what was done back in 2009 in the Wells County when they had zoning for wind towers. There's a lot of good things in there. The mile setback is in there of the document that we were looking at and have looked at when Jana had sent it out. So that stuff's in there. Is there anything else? You know, that's where we were looking at our time. Does Bob have some questions on that? Maybe he wants to look at change.
I just have questions or something.
I'm just bringing it that if that comes up at this meeting, okay, we might have to look at that, and could we vote on that today? Because if we want to make changes.
So the way that it would work is that if you have questions or if you vote to change on something tonight, on any portion of this document, then in 2 or 3 weeks from now, you'll have another public hearing based on the changes that were made tonight. And then if you're satisfied then with what is written, then you would send it to the county commission probably in August.
Right. Yeah. Like if we voted on it tonight just as is and no changes, then it would go on to the commissioners.
Correct. We wouldn't need a hearing anymore.
Right. So I mean, that's where we're at. Is there anything in this document that we think we would like to change? So if we do, we got to come back and have another meeting.
There's a couple questions back here.
The collector lines, I don't think anybody's going to complain about that. You got my review and made recommendations.
Motion that we made.
PRC's already said they're going to do that. That's where I got the idea. That's to make sure everybody does it in the future. And that's my items 1, 2, 3, and 4.
Yeah, that's.
And I did have a problem with the shadow flicker, but that's a bigger issue. The idea that all they have to do is give you curtains, you know, and that would be number 7. The rest has to do with setbacks. But those are the 3 things that I think are. I mean, does anybody have a problem with collector lines going underground, so farmers don't have to plow around poles or farm around poles? We don't plow.
I assume that most places that's done. The ones in Wilton, you don't see any towers.
Yeah, but it doesn't say that. It says that they could use the public right. It says they only have to be underground on private property. So if somebody did want to cut costs, it used to be cheaper to go overhead, a lot cheaper to go overhead than underground. So if you put that in there, they have to go underground in the future.
Right.
We're writing this forever for future.
Well, it's subject to revision. Lori, just to make your comment, you know, a lot of us have done a lot of research on this already, so it's just not that we're not informed. So I'm almost in more camp that you can only kick the can down the road so many times here that eventually you got to make a decision. And here's the thing, nothing's going to be perfect. Everybody's got to realize that. Nothing is going to be perfect. There's going to be somebody that's going to be elated about this, somebody's going to be disappointed, and nothing's for sure. You know, the future always has some risks involved, whatever we do. When you get up in the morning, there's a risk involved. You might fall out of bed. There just is, and I think we all got to take that into consideration when we do this. Otherwise, we'll never make a decision. All right, enough of me.
You know, in your township, if it's a mile setback, is there anything, any of those towers affected at the map you saw?
From a primary residence?
Primary residence.
No. I believe it might be close to a mile, but there's only one that's anywhere close to it.
And
Nobody else lives there.
Maybe. I went to, they only had a 2017 platform, but for Bremen and Valhalla Township at that time, according to plat book, there were 10 residences, 10 in each township. That's probably not the same now.
Well, there's farms out there, but that's where you
So
go
all
to the
names
primary
in the plat book,
residence.
there probably wasn't a residence there.
What's that?
For the name, you know, a point in the plat book that was such a name, that does not mean there's a dwelling
Right,
house.
right. Either they live in town or.
So
One
that's
lives
a
in
total of
Rockford.
what, 72 square miles, 2 townships, correct? So they can't find a place in those 72 square miles to place these 18 towers?
Well, but that's where the definition of the setback, if it's from that farm where there's a livable house, then that changes everything. But if it's from the primary, where you where you vote in November, like, that's your address, that's where you get your mail. If that's the case, there's one in my township that is close, but from the map I've seen, it shouldn't affect the town.
Paul had a question. A
Who?
little bit ago, didn't you?
Somebody had a question?
Paul.
Paul?
You wanted to say something.
Can I restructure that as a comment?
Sure.
It's been a while, so my,
Yeah.
All right.
I don't even remember my question.
I just heard you.
When we met, when we first met, we spoke, and I had some maps, and we talked about the setbacks. As I mentioned earlier, I just emphasized the Burley that we're familiar with, the Burley County ordinance, is something that's well thought out. This is kind of like a lot of things in life. The devil's in the detail, and welcome to hell. This gets very complicated when you have, as I said, a conflicting patchwork of different standards with different definitions for different things. So it gets very dodgy. From our perspective, we're trying to see if there can be a project with what y'all are discussing. I know you're trying to do the right thing, but this is very complicated and an enormous challenge for this body to come up with something that makes sense and everybody approves it and that actually works. Will it actually result in a project? So my comment is that I heard the suggestion of a half mile. When I met you originally a month or a couple months ago, I made the statement that we think the half mile is not that much farther than the 3 times tip height. It's in the ballpark. We're close. I think we're approaching 2,000 feet or 1,800 feet with 3 tip heights. A half mile is in that ballpark. So if you want to recommend something to your county board that they have a chance of approving and that will actually result in a project in Wells County, I would suggest thinking about a half mile on the setback side. At the 1 mile limit, I don't know if you'll have a project. Now, maybe you don't want a project, maybe that's your decision. But I just want you to know that, remind you that at the half mile setback, now the definition, I don't know what the definition is that you're using, and that could make a big difference. So my main suggestion was wait and get it right, but if you're going to do something, I would suggest a half mile might actually achieve something at the county level and actually have a project happen.
You have never been out in Valhalla Township to look at this where these towers are gonna be though. So how can you say that?
We've been
You're going there tomorrow, right?
Not personally.
Our team's been out there
Team's been out there for
quite
sure.
often.
Well,
Okay.
and this really isn't about Valhalla Township, it's about.
Well, the whole county, I
It's
understand
about
that.
the county,
So-
but it's a great point. We need to get out there in every nook and cranny and make sure we
Right.
understand.
Okay.
So you're right.
We can move on.
And
I do have a question too. Are you able to consider and look at your project with a mile?
absolutely, we want to be a mile setback from any residence. I love that idea.
That's what
We
I'm saying.
aspire
It
to
might
that.
be a
perfect world.
possibility.
Most of the turbines are a mile from houses. But when you're designing, I guess my point is that they're not all. And many of them, in fact, most of them are probably a little less than a mile. But they're, at the half mile level, I think we're capturing and able to build most of the project.
So you
We are
do a
working
mile.
now to try and figure out how to go beyond a half mile. Even if you pass a half mile, we're motivated to go 3/4 mile. We don't want to be a mile. We want to be a mile and a half.
So that
So-
is a possibility. It's not killing your project, doing a
Actually,
mile
the-
with the variance.
I'm speaking to our aspirations. The facts on the ground are that there's, when you put a mile setback, it blocks out a lot. So if it's a blanket on all, there would be what we want to do is we want to minimize and have very few areas where we are less than a mile or less than even a half mile. What Wells described is give us a chance to show you a design that has very few. We're trying to minimize impacts. So what you see now is off the table. We're in the reworking phase. So the map from a month, 6 weeks ago, we're done with that. We're making it a better project now. So regardless of what you do, we want to do that, but we're concerned about setting standards that it's like a poison pill. It's like now we can't. We're blocked from doing things.
So if you had 75 towers in Eddy County and 15, and of that 75 towers total can be within a mile or less than a mile, you could still do the project, correct?
Can you rephrase the question?
Well, you're saying that several of the towers are a mile away from a residence.
We don't have a final layout. We're working on it. I apologize, but we're trying to project and give you a feel for where we're at.
So I'm just saying a mile, if you're looking through all your projects.
I don't mean to
Don't
interrupt,
say that
but if
it's
you have a
killing.
question for him, ask him after the meeting.
Okay.
This
No,
really
I
has
get
nothing
it.
to do with our
It could
county zoning.
I got a comment. It appears to me that this whole thing is way more than just about Wells County.
We'll put more pressure on it.
And our job is to look after the best interest of the residents of Wells County. I guess this Sutherland and this Robin, when they come up here and lay it on us, if we don't do what they want us to do, we're gonna cost them all this money. I take that kind of, I don't take that very well. But they're blaming us, and we're just doing the job that we're supposed to do,
Well,
looking after the residents of Wells County.
That's the hard decision. If you want to play devil's advocates, over here, we're going to stifle economic growth and the growth of the economy if we're not for this. And if we are for it, we're going to wreck everybody's pristine lifestyle in Fram Township. This is a no-win situation.
Well, you can move it to Fram Township.
And I don't mean to be flippant on either topic. That's the issue,
Move over there.
right?
Move over there.
What do you want to do?
Where are you gonna go on weekends for vacation, Stan?
Yeah.
Fram Township.
I know.
Cause yeah.
Get the house built.
We have good folks.
What do we do? Do we go through the rest of this tonight, or are the comments over with?
You got a question over there, son.
How does something that requires financial assistance from the public contribute to economic development? I just solved your dilemma. It can't. It requires a subsidy to exist.
So do farmers.
Yeah, farmers are that way too.
And that's irrelevant.
Not really. Not really.
We're talking about wind towers, not the future of farming.
We're talking about subsidies. You brought up subsidies.
I'd rather get rid of them in everything, to be honest with you. They don't help farmers and they don't help the wind industry.
Well, we're not. I really think we need to define, here's my issue, and Bob's got one, we all have one. We need to define what a residence is. I'm in Valhalla's camp in that I think we should define a residence as a primary place of where you live. I mean, you can make it where you vote. That was a good example. You have to live there 9 months out of the year, the majority of the time. I think those people should have more rights. I don't mean to badmouth hunters, but a vacant farmstead that has right there, Burley County's got to stay 1,700 feet away from a shack that hasn't been lived in 40 years.
What happens to
I
that?
agree with